when I hear the previous member talk about the government's plans, I think he has missed the point. This government only thinks plans are something you put in a glossy brochure. You do a sentiment survey. You spend taxpayers' money and finding out what the polling words are that you want to go out there and do media messaging around. This government couldn't plan a chook raffle. And what we've seen in a week when people were celebrating town planning in World Town Planning Day, the embarrassment of a government that can't even plan a basic
Member for Pine
road
Rivers,
upgrade.
order. Member, you have the call.
A basic road upgrade because they don't do basic town planning provisions around road infrastructure that was totally foreseeable. And that, to me, is an example of waste that hurts everyday Queenslanders. The waste of taxpayers' dollars that will see potentially a fire and ambulance station, I believe, or might be a police station, an ambulance station, have to be demolished. A number of houses, brand new houses,
Member for Pine Rivers, order.
Demolished. And this is a reality, not only taxpayers' money, but human stories where people have invested their lives into their homes, some only receiving the keys to those homes literally sometimes days before finding out this government hadn't done the planning, hadn't done its job to put on the map what was required for future upgrades around a road corridor. I've never known anything like it. And as a Member of Parliament, many of us have had to deal with constituents who've had compulsory acquisitions. And we understand that there will be a place where, unfortunately, people's property will be affected by future infrastructure. But they have a situation where brand new homes are affected because this government is so inept. And that level of incompetence is felt right throughout their financial mismanagement. I have never seen anything like it in respect to brand new homes needing to be acquired. And the fact that this government was so incompetent that they hadn't foreshadowed it as a future requirement in the planning documents when people were acquiring that property and when they were developing it. It's just a disgrace. But we see this replicated in every other department under this inept Labor government. And there are very good public servants who are trying to do their job. And they have been bullied, they've been abused, they've not been listened to because there is not a tolerance of voices that are different from the ruling class of the Labor elite. And the Labor elite are the ones who rock up with a NACTA, Labor-aligned lobbyists, and their paid per access is by the washing machine of Labor lobbyists in Queensland who have opened doors to this government to get what they want, but not to act first and foremost in the interests of Queensland. Good planning is seeing ahead and getting it right. And what we're seeing with this government is the very opposite, because they think planning is putting a document under your arm, something that is in fact not enacted with good policy.
Point of order.
I want to talk about
Member, excuse me, Member. What is your point of order?
The member's talking about planning. I fail to see how that has anything to do with the appropriations bill. I raise a point of order in relevance, Deputy Speaker.
I will get some advice.
Thank you. $1 billion or $500 million?
Member, as long as you can bring it back to the long title of the bill, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's an appropriation bill. And we see the Planning Minister requiring, is it $500 million, an extra expenditure to be approved? And there's a whole slab of that is the waste within Waste Camp or Well Camp, a facility that taxpayers won't even get to own. But a planning minister who's asking for additional approvals for planning.
Member for Pine Rivers, order. Member for Pine Rivers, order.
That the planning minister simply hasn't done. It's an absolute disgrace. So there's been a request by the legislation before the House, an appropriation bill, where they're wanting approval for a $2.8 billion overrun on what they expected when they were doing their budget. And I've listened to the yapping of the backbenchers who think that you shouldn't have to have scrutiny on overspend. Well, the truth is, this isn't about some fancy title of reprofiling and pushing, delaying projects. Some projects may never happen because of the mismanagement of this government. And that's a disgrace, because we are a growing state, we need more infrastructure, but the productivity and how that's delivered requires great care not to waste money, such as what we've seen with Wellcamp. That is a project that has just sucked the life out of many other potential projects. Every local road intersection that's been pushed out beyond Q-Trip.
Member for Bancroft, order.
I get it that this government doesn't like to talk about how they've actually removing funding. I've seen it where they've removed funding from Q-Trip and delayed projects by years. And when we raise these matters, I've raised one with the Transport Minister, the M2M cycleway to improve cycle access and pedestrian access around a section of the coastline in my electorate. I've said it's not in Q-Trip anymore. He says, oh, it's funded, and just trust us, it's funded, but it's not in Q-Trip. If it's not in Q-Trip, where is it? And there are many other projects like this where this government says, oh, it's funded, but it's actually not in any budget documents or in some authoritative documents such as Q-Trip. So we're seeing huge amounts of overruns, huge amounts of waste where it should have been directed to critical frontline services, and a government that doesn't like scrutiny. A government that actually squirms when you raise the fact
Member for Pine
that they
Rivers.
misled the public. They blatantly misled the public.
Order. Member for Pine Rivers, I've given you numerous warnings. You may now leave the chamber for an hour. Member, you have the call.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know that some of the yapping that we've heard from certain members of the backbench has been because they don't want to be held to account. It's their government that has misled Queenslanders, blatantly misled Queenslanders, when they promised that they would have no new or increased taxes. They promised no new taxes. But what did this Treasurer do? 4 new taxes. But what did the Treasurer try to do when he was caught out? In misleading Queenslanders, not telling the truth from what he had stated in the lead up to the election to what happened after the election. Oh no, I didn't mislead people because this was a business tax. Well, since when do you have these different categories of promises? Is this a core promise or not a core promise because you don't think businesses deserve a bit of respect? And I think that we're seeing this again with this land tax or renters tax, as has been labelled, where this new tax that was extending this scope of land tax to interstate holdings as well, and essentially removing the benefit of some of those tax-free thresholds and increasing people's tax rate substantially. But no, he was trying to say this wasn't a new or an increased tax. It's been a blatant new and increased tax. Unfortunately, they just don't get it, that often the people who pay the price are those who don't get that house over that roof over their heads. And that's what industry said, that if we're going to see more investment in critical frontline services, this government's got to start listening to people rather than just misleading them, breaking their promises leading into elections, and then trying to blame those who've actually raised their concerns about this in the first place. The shame of a Wellcamp waste and the blowout of more than $3 billion, or at least $3 billion on Cross River Rail, the shame of the other wasteful over-expenditure and missed reallocation of expenditure means that other critical projects aren't yet being funded or have been pushed back. I want to address Sunshine Coast Rail, the rail line to Maroochydore. And this state government is yet to commit $1.6 billion to match federal funding to build this rail to Maroochydore. It is a piece of infrastructure that's needed regardless of the Olympics, but at a time when we're heading into it's shorter now, the 2032 Olympic program of works that need to be delivered, we still haven't seen a commitment from the State Minister. I'm calling on the Transport Minister and this Palaszczuk Labor government to make a decision to commit to this project and get it happening. The federal government has said that they've committed to the project.
Member for Greenslopes, order.
Why hasn't the state government done that? And it's projects such as this that we need to see less of the kicking the can down on the road and a starting date, a construction timeframe that can be achieved. Because the more that they delay, the more that it's evidence that they don't want this to happen. We must see good public transport brought about through all areas, urban areas, and good transport road links through many other areas of Queensland as well. But in southeast Queensland, if we're not to suffocate, if we're not to face extreme gridlock, there has to be proper and timely investment, or else we'll see more of the examples of what we've just seen with those poor families who found their homes are to be demolished potentially for a mere road upgrade that wasn't properly planned. That's a whole department that has a responsibility.
Order, member for
to do that.
Bancroft.
Deputy Speaker.